Let's talk about this exchange between Senator Dick Durbin and Kash Patel.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, I woke up this morning to National Public Radio, and they had an item on there about what has happened to those who were given blanket clemency by President Trump. One of these individuals was a man named Matthew Huddle. Are you familiar with him?
I'm sorry, what was the last name?
Matthew Huddle.
If you could remind me, Senator.
Well, I was reminded again this morning. He's a man who's been found guilty of numerous crimes. The one described this morning was an outrageous situation where he beat his 3-year-old child to a point where the poor kid couldn't even sit down for a week. Mr. Huddle was one of the demonstrators who came to the Capitol on January 6th. He was incarcerated and charged with, and pled guilty to crimes that he had committed, violence against police officers. After he was released by President Trump, he returned to his home state of Indiana. A few days later, he was stopped on the road, pulled a gun on a policeman. The policeman, sheriff's deputy, turned, shot, and killed him. This is not the only instance of a person who received President Trump's clemency committing another crime. Peter Schwartz was mentioned this morning on the radio. 38 criminal convictions, 38. He'd been sentenced to 14 years in prison. He was released because of the president's unconditional clemency, which was given to him as well. So I guess my question is this. Was President Donald Trump wrong to give blanket clemency to the January 6 defendants?
Thank you, Ranking Member. A couple of things on that. One, the power of the presidential pardon is just that, the president.
Well, I concede he has the authority. I'm asking, was he wrong to do it?
And as we discussed in our private meeting, Senator, I have always rejected any violence against law enforcement, and I have, including in that group, specifically addressed any violence against law enforcement on January 6th, and I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
So do you think that America is safer because these 1,600 people have been given an opportunity to come out of serving their sentences and live in our communities again?
Senator, I have not looked at all 1,600 individual cases. I have always advocated for imprisoning those that cause harm to our law enforcement and civilian communities. I also believe America is not safer because President Biden's commutation of a man who murdered 2 FBI agents, Agent Kohlers and Williams' family, deserve better than to have the man that point blank range fired a shotgun into their heads and murdered them released from prison. So it goes both ways.
Leonard Pelletier was in prison for 45 years. He's 80 years old, and he was sentenced to home confinement. So he's not free, as you might have just suggested.
He killed 2 FBI agents.
That's true, he did, and he went to prison for it and should have. My question to you, though, is do you think America is safer because President Trump issued these pardons to 1,600 of these criminal defendants, many of whom violently assaulted our police in the Capitol?
Senator, America will be safe when we don't have 200,000 drug overdoses in 2 years. America will be safe when we don't have 50 homicides in a day.
So you just won't answer the question.
I'm
going to say, I don't think we're safer. Matthew Huddle was sent back to Indiana. I don't think we're safer with Peter Schwartz. I could go through a long list of individuals, some of who are wanted in states, members of this committee.
Durbin opens by doing something very deliberate. He grounds the conversation in real-world consequences, not hypotheticals, not abstractions, real people, real crimes, real outcomes. He brings up Matthew Huddle, someone who received clemency after January 6th, someone with a violent criminal history, including horrific abuse of a child and assaults on police officers. And after being released, Huddle ends up dead after pulling a gun on a sheriff's deputy during a traffic stop. That's not a gotcha. That's a straight line from presidential clemency to community impact. Durbin then mentions Peter Schwartz, 38 criminal convictions, sentenced to 14 years, released through unconditional clemency. Again, the point isn't politics for the sake of politics. The point is, When you issue blanket pardons without case-by-case scrutiny, you are making a decision that affects everyone else who has to live alongside those individuals. And Durbin asks a very simple question, repeatedly. Was President Trump wrong to give blanket clemency to January 6th defendants? Not did he have the authority, not is clemency constitutional, just was it wrong? And that's where Kash Patel starts to dodge. Patel immediately retreats to the technical answer. The president has the power to pardon, which, yes, everyone in the room already knows. Durbin even acknowledges that. Authority isn't the issue, judgment is. When pressed, Patel does something interesting. He says he rejects violence against law enforcement. He says he does not agree with commuting sentences for people who committed violence against police officers. That sounds like an answer, until you realize he still won't say whether Trump's actions were wrong. Then Durbin narrows it even further. Do you think America is safer because 1,600 people were released back into their communities? Again, very straightforward. Patel responds by saying he hasn't reviewed all 1,600 cases. That might be fair on the surface, but it sidesteps the reality that this was, by definition, a blanket decision. No individualized review is exactly the problem Durbin is highlighting. And then comes the pivot. Patel switches to Biden. Suddenly we're talking about a Biden commutation involving a man who murdered FBI agents decades ago. Patel brings up Leonard Peltier and uses emotionally charged language to shift the focus away from Trump's clemency entirely. It's a classic, both sides maneuver, except Durbin immediately calls out the differences. Peltier served 45 years. He's 80 years old. He's under home confinement, not walking free. And Durbin never defended that commutation anyway. He's asking about January 6th defendants who assaulted police officers and were released en masse. That distinction matters. But Patel doesn't go back to the question. Instead, he broadens the conversation to national crime statistics, overdoses, homicides, societal breakdown. All real problems, sure, but they're also a deflection, because the question wasn't, is America facing crime challenges? The question was, did these specific pardons make us safer? And that's the moment Durbin finally says what everyone watching is thinking. So you just won't answer the question. Because he won't. Durbin then returns to names, faces, incidents. He says plainly, I don't think we're safer with Matthew Huddle. I don't think we're safer with Peter Schwartz. And that's really the core of this exchange. Durbin is arguing that public safety requires judgment, discretion, and responsibility, especially when it comes to people convicted of violent crimes against police officers. Patel is arguing around the question, not through it. He's invoking authority, changing subjects, widening the frame, anything except giving a direct evaluation of Trump's decision. And that tells you something. Because if the answer were easy, if the answer were, yes, America is safer, he would have said it. If the answer were no, but here's why the authority matters, he could have said that too. Instead, we get evasion. This isn't about left versus right. It's about whether accountability applies even when it's politically inconvenient. Law enforcement gets praised rhetorically all the time, but this exchange exposes the tension between saying you support the police and supporting decisions that directly put officers and communities at risk. Durbin isn't asking for perfection. He's asking for honesty. And in this exchange, honesty never quite shows up. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Do you think blanket clemency was reckless or justified? I want to hear your take.